What's up, guys? A quick little intro before we get into this next episode. Today, I got to sat down with an old mentor of mine, Mr. Livingston, who's a teacher, author, and a Navy officer. Currently, he's writing a book about the untold story of Captain Thomas Fuller, an absolute Navy badass from World War II. In addition to the history knowledge, Mr. Livingston really dives deep into mental health problems in students today. Whether you're a history buff or someone who's trying to understand his mental health more, this episode is definitely for you. I hope you enjoy.
And we're live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Passionate Club. Okay. Our next guest is not only a teacher, but he's also an author and a member of the reserves. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Livingston.
Hey, how you doing, Mr. Livingston?
Mr. Livingston. Oh, I feel so bad.
You call me Sean.
Oh, I can't.
It feels weird,
I
right?
can't. It feels so
Yeah,
weird.
It does, yeah. I get that. And I get it because I remember when I became a teacher and I went back to like my old high school and I bumped into people that were my teachers. And they were like, call me by this name. I'm like,
That's not happening.
I don't know. I can't. Like, it just doesn't work. I get it.
100%. And I think one beautiful thing about why we were so I was so attracted to the idea of having you on the podcast was during school and everything. I feel like you see so many teachers, right? You see the good ones and you see the bad ones.
Yeah.
I think one thing that struck out to you, from me to you, was you're one of the good ones, easily, hands down. There was something so inspiring about you that every single time you were so dedicated and so passionate about what you did and how you did things. It's kind of why I was you know what, I need to get this guy on the pod. I told my brother, I was and that was a surprise too. It was I didn't tell him till the very end. I was but yeah, there's someone coming and love him. And I said your name, he freaked out, you know? Yeah. So let's start with the first one. Sir, what are you passionate about?
Oh, well, aside from teaching, right, the history and law, but, I'm particularly passionate about history and Canadian history and Canadian military history. I find that we don't talk about, our military accomplishments and anything pretty much that we've done in conflict in Canada. And when compared to the United States, in America, they are very open about it and they do celebrate it to a point where celebration in the sense of overcoming adversity, not in a sense of glorifying war. That's not a good idea to do because war is a horrible thing. It's better not to have it, pretty much at all costs. But at the same time, I think there's a danger in because everyone's so afraid of glorifying it, let's not talk about it at all. And I say, well, that's a mistake because, in Canada, for instance, so much of Canada was the country that we have today is a direct result of conflict. Confederation, sure, that's, we became our own independent country. But if you ask people at the time, Vimy Ridge was when they start really considering themselves as Canadians. Yeah. And that's interesting, right? That really, our country, a battlefield, made us start looking at each other as Canadians and not as,
loyalists or
or whatever, it's the colony we're going to, whatever. We're really from here, we're really from this. I found that interesting, and I'm passionate about teaching of it, and particularly my research is always in the Second World War, and because that conflict is so different than anything in modern history, and so much of today rides on what happened then. One of the scariest things I like talking about with students is what if we didn't win? What would do you think you would still be in a school? Do you think your parents your grandparents ever would have met? Do you think they would have been alive?
Right.
And it's and
would you be in this country, right? Because we're mostly immigrants too as well. So it's starts questioning.
It is because it's and do you know what the Nazis considered okay and not okay?
Yeah.
Because it was all about the blood and this pseudo perverted science of eugenics, and it's scary. What almost happened? It's like a bad plot to a B-budget horror movie. You know what I mean? This super evil kind of organization that believes this really bonkers, weird stuff that no one could possibly swallow. And that almost did it. You know what I mean? And I think I'm internally grateful to those. I don't have a personal a relative that fought in the Second World War. But as a person who lives in Canada, I am and a Canadian, I am very grateful to those that put everything on the line so that I have an opportunity to be the guy that I am today, to have a life, and also to prevent what could have been. Heaven forbid there's parallel universes out there. Being scary to pop your head into one, right? Multiple. Like the multiverse thing idea, and be like, ooh, that's not that one. They won. And so to me, I think it's important to understand the lessons of it, to be appreciative of what was necessary, to be grateful to that, but most importantly, to as a Remembrance Day, when we do McCrae's poem, and he talks about the idea of passing the torch, and that passing the torch is one of remembrance. And when we say lest we forget, that means in fear of forgetting. The idea is like, if we forget the sacrifices of the war, not only is it painful to the memories of those who put down their lives, but it's like we forget how horrible of a thing it was. We forget how it came about. We forget the sacrifice. We forget the pain and the trauma from it, and we do it again. And that's the thing. Human beings, we do it again.
So the quote that history repeats itself, what does that mean to you, and how do you apply it to like what's happening right now?
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
I'll tell you. Just before I answer, when I first started teaching Canadian history, I didn't have contemporary world examples about the causes of the war.
Oh, okay.
Now there's a lot. Students come up with them, and that's scary. Like, I mean, I don't take any joy in that. I'm like, it just progressively, it seems it's more and more. I'm like, why is no one learning from this stuff? Like, there's only so loud I can say things, and there's got to be other people too. But history seems to repeat itself because, and if you look in history, if you just study it, I mean, it's the same themes pop up over and over again. The same incidents happens over and over again. And it's yes, technology develops, and we move and progress in that way, but we seem to fall into the same traps.
I think, that's also part of it. It's when you think like, oh, well, that was from the past. It'll never happen again. Because like you said, technology advanced, this advanced, that advanced. It's like you almost have that like, it's not going to happen. But then the unfortunate case is that it will, it has. Yeah. This is the sign of it. And that's kind of like where you fall in there. Like, you just, I can only imagine, because I think you're not like one of those like crazy conspiracy theorists who wear the tinfoil hat and just live under it. But you're living it, you're teaching it, right? So I think.
Well, I keep the tinfoil hat underneath the desk. When you guys are gone, I put it back on.
In case something happens.
No, it's just history. It's just seeing it, right? And going like, come on, everybody, like,
open your eyes, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, Einstein famously said, I don't know how World War III is going to be fought, but I know how World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. And like, that's the problem about the progression of technology. Yes, we were in conflict over and over again, but now, with weapons being more destructive and Lord knows, I don't want to get into detail. There's a whole bunch of technology and what it's doing now. The idea of like things that are independent, autonomous almost, that can do things. It's almost Terminator now. Like, it's like the consequences are phenomenal. It's like, it's a scary, scary thing. I mean, there's the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, the doomsday clock, right? Well, those folks say that it's closer to midnight than it's ever been in human history. We're closer to, apparently, to these individuals, which is a think tank of incredibly
and who are these
qualified people. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists are essentially, I would just say, a group of worldwide, brainiacs that essentially analyze the situation of the world and put out every year a message to world leaders, a plea to be like, for good Lord's sakes, you're almost like, we're going to. And they give and put in very specific detail exactly why they're saying we're this many close to midnight. So the Cuban Missile Crisis we were further from midnight than we are right now, and that's actually something very, very, very scary. And it's something I think, people like to avoid scary things, but I'm like, you need to read it. You need a bit of a wake up call so that the world can kind of, that silent majority can get off its butt and actually start, and recognize that it's getting a little bit wonky. History repeats itself when we fail to learn from it. When I was in this is brilliant, first year university, I was in a lecture with a professor that University of Toronto, Victoria College, in this one old room and hall, and I remember on this one day he came late, and a bunch of us were yapping. It was political history and political philosophy kind of all mashed together. And we're talking about, like young people normally do, complaining about the world, right? Why are they doing this? It's so dumb. Why do they do this? Why can't they just do this? Oh, I would do this if I do this. He was like a ninja. He just like stealthily came into that room. We had no idea he was there, and he was just listening to us, right? We didn't realize that he was there until he eventually opened. He said something. And he essentially just went, you know what? My plans for today, just kind of closed that all up. He says, we're doing something completely different. And right off the cuff, he's like, he broke us into groups. He's like, I want every single one of you to create like an ideal, like an ism, if you will, or something that will a construct that you would apply to the world to make it better, and he says, and I want it to be original. Okay, so don't go look up anything like that. Like, tell me what you really think just based on all of you talking together. Give it a name, come back, explain it. This is how you would make the world better. This is, if you had absolute control, do whatever you want. This is how you would fix it, and this is what you would do. And we all went into our groups, and we all did this. And when we came back, each one of us gave our presentations. He silently and politely listened to every single one of us. And at the very end, he quietly got up, slowly made it up to the front of the room. There was this old chalkboard. It looks like it must have been there for like 100 years ago, right? And he takes a piece of chalk and he puts the first group name, and then he puts something to the side of it with dates. And then he goes to the second group, puts their name down. Then he puts another name. I'm like, wait, that name sounds familiar. I'm sure I've heard of that in history somewhere. And he puts on some dates. For every single one of us, he did this. Not one of us had an original idea. Every single one thing we came up with had already been tried or at least thought before. And for various reasons, either when put in an application failed or has never even been put in an application because it's just absurd. It's just never possible to do it. That saying there's nothing new underneath the sun sometimes, right? It's like this is the danger. When he showed that, I got the idea. This is the danger of not studying history, because we can be very arrogant. And we can think we're so much smarter than anyone's ever been before. We're so much more advanced. And there's this weird thing that we have this bias towards people in the past that they must have been broken, or they didn't feel as much as us, or they were limited.
They didn't understand our pain.
Yeah, they all died when they were very young. That's, by the way, historically not true. Like Middle Ages, like, oh, they all died when they were very young. And they were on it, and they didn't know anything or something like that. And they were all scared. No. And they thought the world was flat. No, none of them did, actually. None of them did. People have always been people. It's just when you were born and the situation you find yourself in. And the biggest mistake is not learning from stuff. That's my passion. That's why I write about history of the Second World War. I come across things that are just like amazing. And I'm like, how is it no one's like said anything about this? It's like, it blows my mind. And I've always said, like, these weren't Canadian stories. They were American stories. There's no way I would have written a book about them. It would have been done a long time ago. It would have been a movie, some schools named after stuff. It honestly would have been very different. And I think I get disappointed quite a bit in Canada that we're not doing enough to remember and tell our own stories. I don't know if it's we're so scared of being braggadocious, like we're too humble for our own good, or if we're apathetic generally, and we have this kind of like history of like always relying on something else or someone else, or it's like business, like how much reliance on foreign investment. Sure, it's quick and easy in the short term, but history has shown us that in the long term, it has hurt us quite a bit. That's what hurt Canada in the Great Depression, right? It was that.
So then, your love, do you want to check that real quick?
Is that mine?
What's up?
We got going something like that. Yeah, it was mine. I got a phone call for something. It's whatever it is. I'll get a message.
No worries. So then, with this entire thing of you wanting to learn history and teach history, what was the main deciding factor you told yourself that I'm going to be a teacher? This is why. What was your almost your roadmap, and why did you do it?
Yeah, and I know you guys appreciate this, but I went into university like most people, going like, I'm not exactly sure what it is I want to be, but I did have an idea, right? So part of me wanted to be a teacher, and part of me wanted to be a lawyer. And the reason for that was a teacher I had in high school. His name was Mr. Dooling, and he taught law, and he was awesome. And he was a great teacher. And I remember having this aha moment when I was in his class, and I stopped listening to what he was talking about, which was not an easy thing to do. I kind of had this outside moment of myself, and I was observing what he was doing. And I remember being in we had OAC, was grade 13 at that time.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, this guy loves his job. He loves what he does, and he doesn't have Mondays. We show, of course, he's there working, but he's always happy. He's never like, oh, it's the grind.
Yeah.
My dad was in business. I heard that term, the grind, like the week, oh, it's hump day, it's Wednesday.
Yeah,
you're so happy finally get to Friday. And it's like, man, that's rough. And my dad was always like, hey, listen, you do something you really, really love. You know, like, you know, because it's a long,
it's a long life,
it's a long life and a lot of work,
Yeah.
right? He did such a good job teaching law, I wanted to be a lawyer. But then there's this moment where I was like, or do I want to do what he does? So I went into like university, kind of like going for both, right? Like I was kind of like, you know, well, maybe I'll be a teacher, maybe I'll be a lawyer. At first, it was mostly law, and then it gradually started going the other way until I had the decision to make: do I go to law school or do I go to teachers college? A big deciding factor for that was being in the military, right? Which I joined when I was in high school in 17. I joined the Naval Reserves, and there's a lot of like teaching and instruction we do in the military, and I had some opportunities to instruct and teach, and found out I had a knack for it. It was good, and I liked it, and I you know, and I already had this passion for history, and I was like, maybe this is something I want to do, and I always had this idea of being a writer too, and being an author, and thinking, well, maybe that would give me some time to be able to do it, and I end up going for that one, and it was the best decision I made. I absolutely love teaching. I love being a teacher. I enjoy the job. I'm also passionate about what it is I teach, right? So I teach history, but I'm also a historian, right? Like I write history, I do research, I do magazine articles, and I have a book and another one coming out next year, which I'm really excited about. You know, I originally when I wanted to write, though, I was thinking of doing fiction stuff. I never thought I would be writing history, and it's because interesting history, like stories, fall in my lap, and I'm like, why has no one told this? And I'm like, well, and before you know it, the hook's in your mouth, and you're like, well, I better do this, or else no one else knows anything about this, and it's like, it's gonna go. Like the one I wrote about HMCS Oakville, the Second World War Corvette, named after the town of Oakville. We're in Oakville right now. Like I was like, how does nobody know that there was a ship like named after the town? Like hardly anybody knew. Not only that, it was christened off Lake Ontario, just off like, you know, like, it was christened off the shores of Oakville.
What does christen mean again?
Christen means like, you know, when you break the champagne on the side or something, then you officially, you know, and that happened here, right? And not many warships get the opportunity to be christened, you know,
in the actual town that's came from, right?
Named after. They just don't have access, and actually, it was one of the last ones that happened in a war, because then they got worried for espionage or maybe even sabotage, and so they stopped making these big celebrations for them, and wanted to be a little more subdued. And it was a huge thing in Oakville's history, for instance. Like, I mean, it was probably the largest public spectacle I think it's probably ever had.
Wow.
Oh, like, it was crazy the amount of people showed up. There's articles in the New York Times, and you know, English news journalists were here from England that were doing it, and it's like Oakville was popping up everywhere, and they loved it. This great moment. The mayor at the time said, "Oh, we'll never forget it. This will be like a moment we'll never forget." Yeah, they did. And I remember, you know, it started as an essay in university.
Oh.
And it was for a class, and one thing led to another that made me go more and more into it until eventually I was challenged by someone to write a story about it. It was an old naval historian. He's since passed on. His name was Ed Stewart, and he said this weird thing. He goes, "It's you, kid." And he had this old way, like this way of talking, always throwing me off. Always. It was like 1920s, 1930s kind of talk, you know,
like the radio voice.
Yeah, the radio voice. Well, yeah, he's very much a good voice, but he also the you know the sayings and the phrases. He goes, "It's you, kid." And I'm like, Ed, what do you mean, me what? Like, we just sat down. I don't understand what you're saying. He goes, Oakville, the story. He's like, you got to tell it. He says, no one knows more about it than you. He says, and me. He says, but I'm not a writer. Like, I've worked on, like, you know, projects and books, but I'm a researcher. I do stuff, archivist, designer, but I'm not the writer. And I'm really old. At that point, he says, if you don't say it, it's going to go with you. And I was like, oh boy, the obligation, right? You know, like it's like you know, the ghosts of those before, and it's like, I better do it. And that set me on that. And that's like, you know, that ballooned into not only the book, but like there's a monument in Oakville to it. There's a permanent exhibit
because of the book.
Because of the book, there's a permanent exhibit. Well, because then they know me from it, and so then there's a permanent exhibit in Town Hall, with artifacts and the whole thing. My write up on the side.
Oh wow!
My book, my name on the side. I had a big exhibit and a ceremony we did in Queen Elizabeth Park. We had then Minister of National Defense that was there, and the MPs and MPPs all came down, and they've all rallied behind it. The story's amazing, and they love it. And I can't believe I'm the one at the center of all this. It's like, how did no one else already do this? And that's one of the biggest things that really kind of made, is a head scratcher for me, because like, it's one of the few corvettes to actually engage and sink a U-boat in the Second World War. In a war, Navy fought a lot of U-boats when they were going in the Battle of the Atlantic, bringing convoys across. But the Navy's rule was you can't stay and play. That's the MLT. In other words, like you chase them off and you come back, because the convoy never stops. It's like being they refer to it as like sheep herding, and then we got known as the sheepdog Navy. Think of the U-boats as the wolf. They call themselves the wolf pack, and they used the same tactic wolves do. When they spot the convoy, they send their signals out to the rest of them, and they using their coded machines, and they will all enclose around it, find spots around it, and at night attack. Well, wolves howl, and they get everyone around, and they attack it the same way. They attack from all different angles, and this is how they take out things that are much stronger than them. They do it in numbers and in stealth and with speed. And so these merchant ships are absolutely defenseless. They're
just have
slow, heavy, like because they're like just they got so much cargo and material on them, and it's only these warships around them. But they're like a sheepdog. What does like the sheep herder dog do? It goes, it barks at the wolf, it chases away, and then runs to the next one, barks away, and barks, and it keeps them back. Doesn't kill them, keeps them back, and the flock keeps moving. And this is how you do it. So the idea is you got to do the same thing, because if you chase a U-boat, submerges, go underwater, you're dropping depth charges, you're staying and playing, as the Admiral Trudeau say. Well, the convoy continue moving, and then guess what? So many kilometers this way. Now it got attacked yet, and you're not there. And now you're going to take you a little bit, and it never stops. Now you got to catch up and get up there, and it doesn't have its protection. So the fact that Oakville not only engaged, it sunk it, and glorious faction, like it rammed it 3 times. Like it dropped it, it got stuck on it, dropped the depth charge close, like quarters, boom, and all. Like it was, and then 2 guys jumped on board, and hand to hand, like just pistols took over, captured a crew and engaged them in the fight. Like
that's a movie right there.
Exactly, but that's it, right? Even a poster came up from the time was like, it's very like it looks like a comic action. It's a great story, and it's nice to share that. But it's one of these things where I'm like, I can't believe it got forgotten. And my next book, I can tell you the title.
Yeah, right? I was gonna say, what's the next book about?
Yeah, it's Pirate of the Adriatic. The life of Captain Thomas George Fuller, Distinguished Service Cross. He had 3 of them. He got awarded in the Second World War, which is pretty something, including mentioned dispatches. The moniker Pirate of the Adriatic was given to him by the enemy for his, because he had this thing about boarding and capturing supply vessels in the Adriatic. He's probably been in more active combat than anyone ever in Canadian Navy history. And his story is phenomenal, and hardly anyone really knows a thing about him. And so this is where my next book's about him. It's about this individual. He served in coastal forces on these smaller vessels called mortar torpedo boats and mortar gunboats, and very often sometimes referred to Spitfires of the seas, like the aircraft, because they come in real fast, they attack back into the night, and it's close quarters, it's gritty, it's challenging, and he had a phenomenal military career and really sacrificed a lot. But not only that, then after the fact, he just becomes a captain of industry. He gets in construction. He creates Fuller Construction in Ottawa, and becomes a multi-millionaire.
Oh, no way! Which
is still there today. He's a phenomenal individual, and someone I think
he's a G.
Exactly.
He's on his thing. Yeah,
he is. You know what? You remember those old Dos Equis beer commercials? The most interesting man in the world. And he'd be like, I don't always drink. I don't always drink. But I drink Dos Equis. That guy, I'm like, that's Thomas Fuller. Like when he's older, he looks like, I'm like, that's kind of like that. He'd be a good stand-in for Thomas Fuller. This guy is, or Tom Fuller, as they refer to him, phenomenal. A naval legend. Hardly anyone knows anything about him, and so that's why I told the story. And his story is unbelievable. It is so movie worthy. It is beyond the pale. And I would have no doubt it would actually get made into a movie if it wasn't Canadian. We don't really have much of an industry when it comes to it, and we don't really tell our own stories. And when we do, it doesn't quite have the same punch as the way the Americans do.
Who would you want to use him as an actor? What actor would you use?
I'd have to. Actually, I haven't thought about that, and I think I haven't allowed myself to have that thought.
That's
it's way too exciting to think of that. But also then the crushing realizations, like, oh, Canada though, we don't really do
any of that. 100%.
So I get their story out there to and I hope to do them honor. So the book's it's been edited by the publisher, and right now it's being reviewed by some other naval authors and historians to kind of rip into it and make sure everything's proper and give some feedback, and then it's going to get designed and go and get in production. But it's been a lot of years of research and work, but it's one of those things where I'm like, these things fall in my lap, and I'm like, I have to do this. This person deserves so much recognition and beyond this, and it's and we need to. And there's a lot you can learn from it, because they talk about sometimes resiliency is kind of a hard thing. People becoming less and less resilient, and I'm like, you can learn a lot from these World War II guys. They were resilient, and yeah, we're not in the same situation, thank God, because of what they did. We're not, and hopefully we don't ever get there. But it doesn't mean you can't apply it to something you're going through, right? It's like, well, Tom Fuller went through this, so I think I can manage a way. And he kind of thought, you know what? He thought outside the box. He didn't kind of follow. He decided option A, there was option B. He made option C, and he went with it, and he had the guts to do it. So maybe I'm going to do the same thing.
And touching on the thing about resilience, I think so. You are a teacher, of course, right? So you see a bunch of young people, young men in specific. What do you think? Just by looking at them, and you've seen through all the ages, like what do you think that's lacking in them that you may feel is lacking, or what do you think that they're doing that is different, that's almost like a detrimental quality?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, every generation, and I always get, when you study stuff, you like generational history. It's like every generation hates on the other generation, right? The boomers hating on the generation X hating on this and onwards, and like all the millennials and all generations, and I don't even know what the next one's called, and it's but they're all no good whippersnappers up to no good, and and everything's handed to them, and they didn't have to go uphill both ways without shoes on and all this other stuff. And it's I think with having taught for as long as I have, kids are kids, students are students, adolescents are adolescents. There's actually not a whole bunch that I would say has changed when it comes to the people. I think but the world has changed, and technology has changed, and I think the biggest thing is I think that is lacking is the ability to discern between what's real and what deserves my attention and what's not. A lot of students are easily persuaded by production quality, by quick TikTok, and
the reels, I guess.
Reels,
reels.
I've had students be like, "Oh, you got to see this reel I saw, sir. It's about law or something related," and I'm like, this isn't real, right? And they're like, "What? How can you possibly?" I'm like, "Okay, first of all, there's a phone just propped on the bumper of a car, right? The uniform's not correct, but they're also trying not to show too much of it, and it's a little too, I'm like, look, if there's a static camera, it's not moving, right? And things are happening in it. Someone has to set that up, right?
100%.
But then there's other tells. But I find that, what's lacking is the ability to go, like, what's a good source of information? What should I believe and what shouldn't I? And we were talking a bit before we did the podcast, and you were mentioning the fact that stats, and on a reel, if you see, what was it? You said 3 reels?
So the average person, if they see the same stat 3 times while scrolling, they'll believe it. And then the other one is that the non-average person will see it 5 times and they'll believe it.
Yeah, and it's
without questioning.
Yeah, if you see it enough times, you don't question the source where it came from. And you're like, well, it has to be real. Like so many people said it, and like, oh, and by the way, the production value looks good.
Yeah.
So it looks like it's coming from a. And that's what I think it is. Production value equates good source. Because it looks like it's real. And it's like, well, that's actually, interesting, because that's kind of how propaganda works. Like it looks good. It's very convincing. And it's you gotta, the thing that's lacking is being able to tell, like, what's a good source and what's not a good source. Like what's a good place on the internet to find it. The internet, it's amazing to find information, but there's also a bunch of garbage on it, and knowing how to discern between those.
So with the propaganda, what do you think is like what they're almost seeing what type of propaganda do you think, almost like brainwashed, if you can get into that, is what you think the younger generation is saying, that you're like, okay, I think you guys should take a step back and actually start questioning a little bit more?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's really, I think it's in general, just especially when it comes to world like events that are happening, like they'll, right away I'll fire it up about something, and they just repeat the little, 3-second blurb they heard. And when you ask them something about it, they blink, and they just repeat it. And it's like, okay, no, but
what is it?
Tell me a bit more about what is that? Like, and like, hey, listen, just on the sound of that sounds horrible. And but I mean, do you know that's even real or not? Like, like your time and your energy is important. Let's make sure that it's real. Like, no one wants to be a donkey. No one wants to be like found out after the fact they've been had, and hoodwinked, so to speak. Like, you want to make sure like what it actually is. And the idea of me even questioning that stuff and then showing it to them is what surprises me is just how surprised they are. Like, it's like the buy-in factor is so powerful. It's like not even like any like. It's almost like, I don't know if it's gullible or it's like, like, or in my generation was more like we don't trust anybody, right? Like I grew up like, in the early 80s and then 90s as a teenager and like, grunge and all attitude and like, not untrusting of anyone else and being all upset. Maybe that kind of helped. But I also grew up like before the internet and with the internet and I've seen it all. So I remember having to like rely on like actual sources.
Like
and,
books and this and
books
that.
and journal articles and things that are peer reviewed. And just because it's a book, well, whatever. Like my book, you have to look at all the endnotes and all the citations, all the stuff where I'm saying, hey, that's why this is where I'm getting this stuff from. Or otherwise, like, how do you know I'm not just making it all up, right? So you got to like back it up with facts and importance to show that this is where it's from and this is where I'm getting from. And there's tons of books out there that don't do that. And but say what they're saying is something that's real or true, and it's important to be critical. I mean, what's the worst case? You look into it and you realize you only like strengthen that position. You're like, oh, absolutely true, and you find more information, and then you realize it's something worth your energy and your time, and you should feel the way you feel about it, right? Or you realize, wow, that was close. Like, oh, I almost just made a donkey of myself in front of everybody. Like, I almost went right out open and said stuff, and that's another thing I find too. It's not only the buy-in factor, it's the shooting from the hip, responding online to stuff, right? Like just right away, you just respond. You just say it. And you just throw down all your cards, and it's like,
there it is.
It's like, whoa, dude, you don't even know if that's real yet. Like, and you just said what? It's like, and with those words, I'm like, man, like this stuff digitally stays. Like it's like that's who you are. You're not like you want everyone to think this is how you talk. This is who you are. And it's like it's dangerous for kids, right? Because at least in my day when I was a kid, like, we had mulligans. Like, we had second chances. And people are like, I don't, like, I was a dumb kid. I did stupid things. Like, I don't need that aired out all the time. You can learn from it. And it's hard for kids to learn from their mistakes today, I think, because they stay with them. And sometimes we're a world that is unforgiving of, like, mistakes we all make. I think there's a lot of, like, not to get religious here, but, like Christ says, hey, like you vote and you cast the first stone. He's like, hey, listen, all the rest of you being judging here, right? It's like, what about yourselves?
Yeah, of course.
Right? Like, have you looked into your own background here? And every one of us has done stuff. We've all learned from it.
Yeah.
I remember this one Indigenous leader in Canada said, like, he says, everyone in history has warts. And he's like, we're human, we're flawed, we learn. Like, that's why I teach history, and I say the great, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. It's the only way to do it. You just say it for what it is. And if it's great, then it's great. And I'm not going to hold back. But if it's ugly, then it's ugly. And we have to get into it. And you got to know it all. Can't sugarcoat stuff. You can't just skip things because it's like, oh, man, that kind of looks bad. No, like, it doesn't work that way.
So what advice would you give to a kid who comes up to you and saying, like, oh, I posted this, I did this, or this is what's happening in life right now? How would you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'd give the kid credit for coming up and doing that, because I'm like, you know what, like, that's like you're seeking some help from someone else like that. That takes some guts to do that. And I've always said I admire strength. That's one of the things I love about like people who served in the Second World War, for instance. But it's strength to me is not like push-ups and like weightlifting or stuff like that. It's character,
mental resilience, mental toughness, things like that.
Exactly. Grit.
Yeah.
And I admire it. And so if a kid comes up, I'm like, hey, listen, that's good. That's great that you're doing it. But then, the next thing is like, okay, let's see what you're doing. And like, and why did you write it? And what did you look up first? And just try to get them to understand, like, look, people judge you on this stuff. And they judge you not just today, they'll judge you like 8 years from now, maybe, right? So you want to, like, have a game plan. Who do you want the world to see you as? And you got to understand that in the world. Like, look, there's a reason we say, like, your family and friends are so important, close to you, because no one else cares. No, the world doesn't care unless you give it a reason to. No one's going to, like, I've had students like, why should I respect you, blah, blah. Like, sometimes once in a blue moon you get, like, and they're young, and you know what, I actually don't mind this, because this is a kid that's just, they got some fight in them. They're critical thinking. They're making a fight. I'm like, hey, there can be a good lawyer right there, maybe, right? Because making an argument. But, but I'll answer the question. It's like, what do I have to, why do you get to call me by my first name, but I have to call you Mr. Livingston? And now at the end of it, they're like, okay, I get it. Like, it's like, because I'm like, okay, well, because I've done this, I have this, I've done this. And at the end of it, I'm like, at the end of it, I go, okay, wow. I'm like, well, that's why. Okay, because I've done something. The world has actually acknowledged I've done it, and I've earned some respect, right? You haven't done anything yet. You've been like, you're.
Do you think you see a lot? Yeah.
But one day, they don't get. Start thinking sad. It's like, no, hold on. But you will. You'll do amazing things, and when you do, I will look you in the eye and I will call you, like, Miss whatever, like that, and I will acknowledge that you've stepped it, you've joined that club, you've done it, right? There's a thing of respect to those who have actually been before and have actually accomplished some stuff.
Do you think you see a lot of times just students, sorry to cut you off, but they see that they demand respect without earning it, and do you think that's something that's happening a lot? Or is it just more of like a here and there type
It's
thing?
a here and there thing.
Okay,
I mean,
good.
most kids, honestly, most students are just shy and,
Yeah.
they're just quiet. And there is an idea just generally with you sometimes. Like it's a bit of rebelliousness. It's the idea of wanting to stand up. Like, I mean, I've never liked two sayings. I think one of them was like, all kids think they're like, you all think you're invincible. I was like, I remember being young thinking like, I know I can't run straight into a running train and survive, or jump out of a window and fly. Like I do have a reality testing, but I get the sense like the reality though, the full understanding of just how of my mortality wasn't necessarily quite as there. Like you're a bigger risk taker usually at a younger age. I think that's what it means. It's better to say it that way. And also the other ones that you think you know everything. I think it's not that you think they know everything. I think it's they're not aware of how much they don't know.
The unconscious incompetence.
Yeah, like it's like exactly.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like it's and it's like well I only know this. It's the understanding. Yeah, but there's a lot more.
Yeah, I think this
and
quote that
your reality is only a wee little bubble that has been in very protected zones. Like school, I like the idea of a classroom, but I like making clear it's like this is a safe, and it needs to be a safe space where you can screw up, and I don't hold it against you forever. And we work from that. We do it because the real world. Oh boy. Oh no! It doesn't do that.
Yeah.
If you do come across that, whoever the person is, they're amazing, and you should pay it forward. And I think more people, and it should be more that way, but it's not. I tell my students how many impoverished people like on the street have you walked by and never given a second look?
100%.
The world has no problem doing that to you too, and it's like you've got to it's not fair. It's it's not right. But morals and ethics aside, that's the reality of the world, and I want them to have survival tools so they can actually do that. And part of that is like I want my students to be informed, conscientious, informed citizens that are active, right, and that actually do stuff and because it's amazing, sometimes horrible things happen because some horrible person was voted into the power, and that's that happens. And sometimes those people get voted in because most people didn't even bother to vote. And, there's a lot of lessons history shows us. If you know where you came from, then you can have a clear path where you're going. And that's the importance of it. But historians are kind of annoying in some ways, right? Because we tell people things they don't want to hear, right? When they want ignorance is bliss, and they don't want other people to hear it. And so often when bad things happen, people go like, why did no one say anything about this? And there's like exasperated stories going like, we were saying it the whole time to you, but you kept going like, yeah, whatever, off to the side. And it's, no, it's important. It has huge consequences. So I think, I think it's good to learn stories of in Canadian history of Canadians that have accomplished great things, and I think it's important to do that. And I think it needs to be a good across the board, like a diverse thing. Project I worked a co-founder of is Canadian Naval Tribute Project, and it's a memorial that's in Toronto, and we have 14 honorees, and we're acknowledging unsung kind of heroes of for the roles they did in the Navy. We have people done gallantry stuff, but we also have people that broke racial barriers, gender barriers that were there, and to make the Navy what it is today. And, and their stories are cool. And people will some people are like, oh, you're only doing that because it's or it's the trend right now. It's like, no, it's a good, you know what? Read the story, their bio that I wrote, and then come back to me and tell me if it wasn't actually
interesting.
Yeah, because they're all good. A good story is a good story is a good story. And a person that's accomplished something that was the first person to do it, had to break and or had to overcome stuff that's I admire that strength. How can you not? That's inspiring. You know, that's something where I'm like, well, then in my life, like if I got something of a problem and like I want to do this, you know, or I'm going to take a similar approach and I'll think of some option C, you know, I'll do something else.
Yeah,
right?
option C, 100%.
Yeah.
And then also touching with, you spoke briefly about strength and resilience, and not only on the physical aspect, but then you're seeing this on the audio. Mr. Livingston is jacked. That's one. That's there. He's an officer, and you can see it. You do a lot of. I heard or at least I know of martial arts you used to get into, right?
Yeah.
So how has that shaped your life and overall, just like keeping your physical health as a priority?
Yeah.
How has that helped you?
I think, I mean, I like, I mean, for me, I like the feeling of being in shape. But the other thing I did as well is when I became an officer in the Navy, I was like, well, I want to still be able to run with the, you know, the sailors, everyone else. Like, I still want to be able to, like, keep up. I don't want to, you know, and it happens. Sometimes you get older, you go on, and, like, the physicality goes down because you're at a different kind of level and you're doing things. And not to say they're not valuable. Trust me. Like, there's some, you know, people in the military you look at, you think are not in great physical shape, but, like, they are amazing at what they do and are incredibly essential. And I'd say don't let looks deceive you. You'd be pretty, you know, surprised real quickly what that person can do. But for me, that became a very important thing. And I think that the military instilled that in me a bit. And also martial arts. Like, I got into that when I was younger. Martial arts was very impactful for me. The discipline. I started with Goju-ryu Karate Do. One of the traditional Okinawan forms of karate. And, you know, I remember, you know, the saying was always that, you know, every time you're in a dojo, it begins and ends with courtesy and respect. And that extends to everything else in your life. And they would start teaching you that what the karateka, the practitioner of karate, is always. It's not just when you're wearing your gi and you have your belt on. Well, it's something you do all your life. And so I found that very, that motivated me beyond even just, you know, I did different forms of martial arts later on after getting to a certain level with it. And also because I moved and stuff in your school, like that can be kind of tricky too. You know, and I particularly like, you know, Kenjutsu and Yaijutsu or Yaido. I find something very spiritual when doing the sword and very calming and,
like a katana and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So, like, Yaido normally typically uses like a nickel alloy kind of katana. It's not really sharp, but the drawing sword, although some practitioners have the real ones and it's quite sharp. Mine's a steel sword. If you do, you can actually do live cutting drills and all that. So we actually have a proper katana. It's like, you know, learning how to do that. And then, you know, cutting tatami mats. I enjoy doing that. And then there's the actual Kenjutsu schools, which are actually like, you know, the traditional how to fight with it. Like, a person does this is what you do in return. This is like, and some of them are pretty secretive because, you know, although historically, I mean, the application is no longer there, but the idea is that you didn't want the other, like some schools emerged as a response to another style of school. And so they don't want you to know what their actual, like, you know, when you find out it's too late, right? Like, it's like, you know, and they walked away from the fight. I find those, it was just very interesting. And I think that provides a level of discipline that really helped me. I remember I was 16, and I went to HMCS York, the naval base in Toronto, and my father was invited by the commanding officer. They actually worked in like Fuji photo film, like in their day job, right? And so that's the thing about the reserves. Like, you do a day job, and then you got to go do all this stuff, right? And it's you know, he used to say twice the citizen. And so he invited him down. He said, "Well, bring your son." And I saw the parades and all the you know, the brass and the shiny stuff and the drill and all that, and they were wonderful to me. Like, I was in a mess, and I was standing like a martial artist though. Like, I had my hands like the way I was in my stance open. It was just natural, and they were like, "You're And I remember getting compliments on my level of discipline that I had. And they're like, "Wow, for a young guy, you have a lot of discipline. You should really do this." And I mean, that influenced a lot of why I ended up joining. Yeah, I think it's a great thing. I think it's good to be involved in something, especially youth. Like, nowadays, like, you know, it's so easy to get lost on a screen, and never like use your extremities. Like, listen, screens are cool. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. Like, people are going to listen to this using like your devices. You know, they're going to watch it. Like, that's totally like that's fine. I like doing that too. But I also like moving, and I also like moving around. Like, do a sport, get something where you know what it's like to work with other people, and you're not like just completely by on your own. And it's like, well, I do multiplayer online. It's like, that's not the same thing. You know, there's weird people on that stuff too. Like, no, when you're in a team, you actually depend on each other, right? or maybe it's not even a team sport, but it's still something physical you're doing where like you're with other people and you're both like, you know, you're progressing together, and it's like it helps, right? I think it's a very important thing.
100%. I think it teaches you so much more than you think that it would.
Yeah.
Like the discipline factor. I feel like when you start realizing that, like I look at me with my lifting career and everything that happened, it's like I first started with like, okay, I'll just do these reps, right? And I was like, okay, I got a little bit of pump, but nothing. Okay, 2 months in, a little bit, nothing.
Yeah.
And now 2 years goes by, I look back and I was like, whoa, like I got this. I like people start telling you things like your arms are like this, your shoulders are like this, and like that's nice to hear. But even for yourself, it's like wow, like at the end of the day, when I boil everything down, the formula was do this many times without complaining, and then you get your results.
Just keep doing it,
right? And then so many people talk about it like, oh, you just have to keep doing it. But the beauty is when you actually put that into something and you can see it come to life over time, then that almost inspires you even more. It's like, you know, maybe this discipline thing is not the worst. Maybe I should continue doing this one thing.
Well, discipline, that's really what it is. I mean, some people think like discipline's just being like, you know, doing what you're told. Well, no, it's self-discipline is like, you know, being in charge of your life, you know, and taking charge of yourself. You know, and that what you just kind of told me working out reminds me of something I always say. I say like, you know, you only really ever fail when you give yourself permission to quit. And to add to that, quit something that like is meaningful to you. So like, look, when you have these, and I mean like a big goal. Like you have big goals, like never let them go. Everyone in the world's gonna tell you can't do it. You know how many people said, yo, you can't be in the military and be a teacher and be an author and also just stuff St. John, like all this other stuff I did. Like everyone says no. And big people too, you know, that you would like, you know, when it really hurts when they say it. But then it comes down to the end of the day, just don't quit. Like you look at people who've accomplished stuff. It's so easy to see the accomplishment. They're already at the top of the mountain. Like but it's easy to not realize they're at the top of a mountain. You're like, yo, they had to do a lot of stuff, and they screwed up a million times up and away. Like no one like remembers the screw ups or really cares about it. All they care about the fact you succeeded. Mistakes are your steps to success. Like that's how you get to it. It's like, oh, well, I know that doesn't work. I'll try doing this. That's how it works. Just don't quit. If it's a big goal. Now, I think like people talk about quitting in a weird way. I mean, like I look at it like, look, your end destination is like you're driving and you're trying to get there. Like, okay, so if the road's closed in front of you, you take another route. You're still going to the destination, right? You just don't suddenly go, I'm going back home. Forget this. I'm never going again, right? Like it's like that's the point. Don't quit on the goal. Look, maybe what you thought was getting to it isn't working.
Process of the goal, yeah.
Yeah, then change it. Oh, you're a quitter. No, you're not. You're not quitting the goal. You're finding a new route that's better. If you ditch the whole thing, well, don't do that. Just don't quit. That is the secret, I think, to anything in life. Just never stop, right? Don't give yourself permission to give up on a dream, on a goal.
So with that in mind, I want to kind of touch on, like, I don't know if you can, but what do you think the main thing you think that should be taught in schools, right? In the sense of, like we just talked about discipline and how you got so empowered by it and how that's almost like something that's changed. But that you got that through the Navy, I got that through the gym, other things. How do you think, like, what do you think is what's, like, should really be taught, or in addition to what's being taught right now?
I think it's important to, as early as you can, really start getting to people and teaching more about, like, you know, I think, yes, we do a good job getting the idea of teaching, like, basic, essential things that you need, right? Writing and your reading and literacy and math, you know, and
critical thinking,
math
yeah,
literacy
of course.
Critical thinking. Well, I mean, with the critical thinking, yes, that's actually a big one to really add in, because that wasn't something. I think that kind of happened as a byproduct when we were younger. Also, I think people checked you a lot more because they weren't so concerned about your, like, hurting your feelings, right? So sometimes it was a bit harsh, but, you know, that worked for some of us. For some people, that really pushed them the opposite way, and that wasn't a good thing, right? You know, so I think critical thinking and doing that is an important thing, but also just like understanding character, you know, and a bit of reality talk about what the world is and what it isn't, and what does it take, and how to be what you essentially feel you should, and having the courage to go for it. Because, you know, and discern between what's healthy and what's not, you know, like, and what's a good goal to have and what's a realistic way to go about it, or be able to, like, just plan, you know, like, okay, Well, so you want to be breakout, like, in music, well, okay, that's awesome. Now, not many people just go straight into that, though. Like, yes, there's examples, you always people, but, like, there's a whole litany that people don't. So I'm not saying don't do it, but maybe you can do it in a way where you also have a way you support that goal. You do other stuff that, like, that enables you to have it and do it. And let's look at what that is. I think that's a kind of an important thing to do. And I think in addition to that, it's also looking at the stories of people and recognizing and doing real deep talks about, like, what does it mean? Like, the feelings when you don't succeed something and how that sucks and how do you push beyond it and to learn to live with that and to recognize that, look, it's a human thing. It's not like all of a sudden, like, other people just have it. It's always easy to say, well, it's different for them. They had it easy, or they're different than me. They don't feel things like that. Like, they're just so confident naturally in this and this and this. And it's like, well, that's your mind. That's your mind
That's
talking
your narrative,
to you,
yeah.
and it doesn't always tell you the truth, right? It's not their brain, and you need to stop listening to that and actually go and check to see what's actually real. Because I think some people are so surprised when they find out that their heroes or people they look up to or people they thought that had it so easy had it was a struggle. It was hard, and they had issues where they had self-doubt, imposter feeling, like when they felt like they weren't.
Of course, the imposter
this,
syndrome,
that they are maybe not as confident as they come out to be.
I think that's like when people look up to that. It's like they fall in love with the person because they were so close to their shoes, and it's like, oh my god, like he actually is normal. He went through the same struggles I did. Even with like say the podcast, right? I was always someone like even most people they know, like I struggle with speaking a lot, and I struggle with like talking to people. I was always very nervous and very anxious. Yeah. And I tell people that I was like, yo, it was actually very hard for me growing up, and very hard for me even the podcast. It was like being able to speak so freely. But everyone was like, oh, I guess he's naturally good at talking. He's naturally so like fun and stuff. It's fine. But no one really sees that. But then when you actually talk to someone who's going through the same struggle, and it's like, oh my god, I know exactly how you're feeling. This is what happened to me. Their mind's blown. They're like, what the heck, you? Or this is what happened to you, and all these type of things. It's like, like it takes a lot of to like not show that, but at the same time showing that has its own like benefits, right? Being like able like, yeah, I've been through it, so I understand it, right? And then even with that, it's like when you're going through the struggle, I think the biggest thing for me was accountability, right? Being able to realize that like if something didn't go the way I wanted it to, I can blame everyone else. Yeah. And I blame everyone else but myself. Yeah. But then at the end of the day, I was like, okay, well, like that's like you said, the world's like it's a cold world out there, right? Like no one's gonna like just wait for you to ask you about your feelings. It's like you gotta step up, right? You gotta be able to realize that like this is your problem, regardless if it was like your fault that it happened or not. It's yours now, right? Yeah. What are you gonna do about it? You gotta take accountability. You gotta take that. And I feel like that's something I never thought about throughout high school. It was like, okay, well, that's just life. I mean, nothing much I can do about it. That nothing much I can do about it was so detrimental, right? Yeah, right? And like, there's not really much of a way you can tell someone like, oh, you should learn accountability, right? It's more like they go through life, but like I think that's one of those skills that are kind of going detrimental or whatever. It was a lot of people even forget about the kids, adults, young adults as well. Like they lack that, right? They blame you can see the comments on like some posts, like everyone's like, oh, this shouldn't be like this, that shouldn't be like this. It's it's the world's fault, but not mine, right? I should do everything else but change myself. Right? And they say like change. If you want to change 1,000 people, you got to change yourself. And like change begins within self. And it's thrown around so much, but people don't realize the magnitude of that quote of that sheer accountability itself. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, I mean, and it's interesting too that you said because I know you were saying like something that kids could need, and I think one of the biggest things that like I've only like learned later in my life as an adult is like we need to work on communication skills. And I mean, not just the idea of pushing past the fear of getting up in front of people and talking. I mean, I got the same thing. People look at me, oh, you're natural. It's like, I'm a teacher. Like, like I practiced it a lot. I used to have the reps, But I also went to a school when I was a kid. They had speech night. Everyone had to do a speech in front of everyone else's parents. And we were all like nervous, sick. Kids got sick and threw up. And they were like, you know what? You go, you're still going to do it. And you will you're going to hate us right now. Maybe thinking a horrible thing, but one day you will thank us for it. And I remember like us thinking, there's no way in the world I'm ever going to thank. Yeah, no, absolutely, you're right. There's not a moment I'm like, oh my God, thank you for making me do it, because to push myself past my fear, because I don't think I would have done it on my own. I needed someone. I needed that, not just a nudge, a serious kick, right into it. And the more I did it, the less it was always scary, but the less and less scary it got. Mm-hmm. And then eventually there's this beautiful point where maybe you get to where you don't care. Yeah. What are people, because you're like, whatever, take it or leave it. I'm not. And that's it. But it takes, some people are blessed to be there right away. Most of us,
takes a while.
It takes a while. and we're in progress of, so we're practicing and we're putting it on, like we're doing a show, but we're probably actually like, a lot of comedians are freaking out just before they go. They look so confident, but before they do it, they're like sick because, and that's part of the, the performance of it, right? And it's you get better as you go on, and eventually it does become that. And maybe you're always going to be just a little bit nervous, but you recognize the importance and the necessity of doing it. I think like getting how to talk, how to communicate, especially like,
we have a podcast here for that, guys.
Yeah, we do. But like, especially for guys, like, when I grew up, it's like feelings, like what do you mean what I feel about this?
Yes.
Whatever. Whatever, let's just go do this. Let's forget it. Let's not talk about it. And knowing how to express my feelings and how to use like
articulate your emotions are very important.
Yeah, exactly.
Very important.
Use an I statement, not blame someone else for something all the time, and just own what I'm feeling. Actually learn what the damn words are for it, because I remember the first time I did struggling with this. 100%. Like, I'm not used to naming my feelings. I'm used to like just swallowing them and suck it up and move on. And I don't. There's a place for suck it up, but there's also, but it's healthy to also articulate and communicate it. And I think it's something that's something that's a powerful thing that could be done in school, to learn how to communicate in
effectively,
and certainly get up there and do the talk and break past it, because you have to present yourself. You have to, the things that people say, this is so dumb, I'm never going to use this. Like, what do I need to do an essay? It's like, I'm never going to do this. Like, yeah, you will, because you need to like make someone, one day you're going to be like, you need to hire me. It's my thesis. Here are the 3 reasons why you should, here's my proof and my arguments and my proofs for it. Conclusion, hire me. Right? You're going to have to convince someone.
Yeah, exactly. It's a sale, right?
Yeah. And if you can't verbally convince someone, if you can't look another human being or a panel of them, I remember like in my job interviews, there was like, it wasn't just one person, a whole bunch of them, right? And you can't convince them. That's a problem. And if you're thinking, well, and if you can't do that in high school, when are you going to do it?
Exactly.
And like you and your brother here, you've been through like post-secondary, like that's not, that's not their job to do that. And it's not going to be the business now. Like you have to, or you'll get, someone else is going to get noticed.
100%. I feel like even touching on the communication thing, I always knew as like it was such a powerful thing. So when I was kind of saying that we had a podcast for that, is we actually had a public speaking coach on, and he does for a living, and he was sick. He works with banks, really big companies, and his whole thing was, you never actually overcome nervousness. You just deal with it, right? He's like, everyone's nervous. He's like, the main key for it is calluses. And he goes like, when you go to the gym and you do all these reps, like you get those calluses in your hands to show that you did the stuff, right? You did the work. He's like, when you speak enough and you do it enough, you still might get a little bit of that stomach feeling, but it's like after a while, it's like you're okay, right? And he was giving tips about like how to get over that little bit of nervousness in the beginning and things like that. But he just told me how important it was, and we kind of talked about how like it's not just about communication isn't just about like what's the word, school and a presentation. It's like it's about life, right? Like you said, it's like you're talking about how it might affect you in school and job, but it's like your partner, right? If something happened at home and you don't know how to be like, hey babe, this is what's wrong, this is why it's wrong, let's talk about it
this way. It's not about like if you can't articulate that, like let's say something's happening to you and you're upset, your partner might think you're upset with them, and that starts causing something, and you'll be like, oh my god, no, that's not true, but you're not communicating it
exactly.
And again, this is not something that like I learned. My dad's a great dad. He was awesome, something like that. Talking about his feelings is not something he did.
Exactly.
Neither, and certainly not his dad. Geez, the old gentleman, no, right? And so it's just kind of like, but there for everything, unbelievably supportive guy. But it's just like, yeah, it's important, like, for life to be able to do that, and this is why it's. Where is humanity without communication?
Exactly.
Like this is communication. Everything is a form of literacy. Like I'm writing the books, the stories, television, all mediums. Like imagine a world where we all of a sudden lost our ability to communicate, and for some reason, then in this weird thing, we just also couldn't like sign. You know what I mean? We just can't, any form of communication.
Yeah.
Then we all become alienated from each other, and we're social.
We're social creatures, yeah.
And so it's absolutely essential to do it. And I feel for people that are too scared to do it. But the thing is, you learn to live with it. Like you do. Like it's not like it goes away.
And there's nothing like you can't get around it. Even like I'll talk to kids about it. It's like they're like, oh no, my whole thing is, the whole Escape the Matrix that's like popular right now.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm like, yo, me too. Get me on those. But here's the thing. If you want to get paid, like it's usually like there's a medium of exchange, right? You do something and you get something done. And it's not that like, if you want to be like, well, I'm going to work for myself and not really talk to anyone, I was like, yo, like, sorry, I hate to break it to you, sweetheart, but that's not the reality. You'll always be in front of a client. You'll always be in front of someone.
Yeah.
An email, even if it's like you want to ask for something, that's going to be something where you're going to be tested.
Yeah,
and it's
they
like
judge you on it
exactly. And they'd be like, if you can't, it's like suppose you might be the perfect person for the job, or like in like your stats wise. Even for me, like when I got my job at like this really big for accounting firm, I was super scared because I did not have like the credits for it. Right, I was like my average was lower. My resume was decent, but I was scared. I was like, okay, like, I don't know how I'm going to do for this interview. But everything they asked me was behavioral questions. And I think I would say, like, I spoke really well. Like, I spoke confidently, clearly. And even after I asked him, like, so what really made you decide me? And he was like, you spoke very well. He was like, you knew what you were talking about. Or he's like, you allowed us to think that you knew what you were talking about. Yeah. Right? And I think that was the biggest, like, what distinguished between me and the other guys were like, well, he actually knew, like, he just spoke better, right? Because everything's a team. Everything will be in front of clients. It's like, do we want to hire this guy? Yeah, he knows a lot, but, like, this guy can learn all the other stuff. Like, everyone knows that in a job, you'll eventually learn everything, right? You'll learn how to do the job.
You can work with this guy, though.
Yeah,
because I just connected right now, and I felt good about this.
Exactly.
Feeling good after a conversation is a very powerful thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to connect, right? It's you know, and I like the fact that, you know, acknowledging the struggle and the difficulty about it. Like I was petrified talking in front of people. In my classroom, I have like one of these like Navy license plate thing covers, but they're on the top. But the reason I have it there is not because I did service in the Navy. It's because I remember I was behind in school when I was younger, and I was unmotivated. I have ADD, and I mean, I got anxiety stuff I work with too, right? So that's the thing. People hear that, like, what, you're anxious? It's
Yeah.
like, oh, yeah, no.
You're an officer, what the heck?
And it's like, it's like, well, but I work with, I live with it, and I learn how to go beyond, right? I don't let it own me.
Plus ultra.
Right? And, but here's the thing, right? Like, so what I do is, I remember, like, I was behind in, like, something like, I was in Quebec for a bit, and we came over here, and I was a bit behind with reading and everyone else. And they didn't really actually do anything to try to teach me individually how to do it. I just kind of like was trugging along. And used to do these like games where like you had to stand up, like, and they'd give you a math flashcard, and the quickest person to get the answer would continue playing along. And they did this with words. They give you a word and you had to spell it correctly and you move on. And I remember that being petrifying because I wasn't spelling things correctly. And I remember being in this grade where and I wasn't doing work. I was unmotivated, and I spelled the word Navy correct. And I remember the round of applause I got from my classmates, which was not a, hey, way to go. It was like, oh, look, the idiot finally got one. Pathetic, like, good job, finally, right? And there's this moment where I could have gone two ways. And it's good to have some fight in you. It really is, right? It's okay to say, no, I'm not putting up with that. Or, you know what? Forget this. I don't care what you're saying. I'm doing this anyways. It's okay to have that fight. I mean, not necessarily punch a person in the face unless it's self-defense. You have to. Really not the best way of going about it, especially in schools. But I'm saying, like, but to have some, like, you know, that grit internally, what I did is I studied my butt off. I memorized it. They're never laughing at me again. I creamed everybody. But a month later, I destroyed everyone. I remember this one kid being like, yeah, it's only because he studies. Now, I wish I was smart enough, like, as an elementary student, to be like, that's how it's done. Yeah. There's no other way to do it. Just don't magically know.
Yeah.
It's another thing where I find that some people and students, and you may know some people, or even be guilty of yourself at one point, you know, when they do really well in something, but they act like they didn't put a lot of effort into it. But, you know, it's almost like this thing where you have to pretend like, it was so natural to me. Like, oh, no, what, this, nothing. It's like, I'm like, no, dude, say you studied your butt off. Say you worked your butt off. It's okay. Right?
It's okay to work.
Yeah. And you know what? And I got this because I deserve it, because I put all this stuff into it. You know? But that's why I have that up there too. So when I'm teaching some people and they don't feel the confidence, it's a reminder to me constantly too, like where I came from and what I'm trying to do and trying to reach. I wish I could get every student.
Of course.
I don't always. Sometimes, you know, it's another teacher, hopefully, right? But I try, and because I remember being that guy. I remember being the kid everyone thought was dumb and was never going to amount to anything, and was willing to the system just let me just go, slip to the side. Thankfully, I had some good teachers that recognized something in me and said, like, no, there's something, and it was enough. And I had that grit. A bit of that fight was there too. You got to have a bit of a fight. And if you don't, you got to have a fire. You got to have a bit of a fire in you. It's you. It's your life. You know, you're worthy of it. And you deserve to make it what it is that you want it to make it. And damn anyone who tells you otherwise.
I think that's such a powerful thing, not only just for like you said about life, but like one thing about like mental health. And I think I remember I saw one of your posts about like it should be talked about every day, not just a month for it.
Yeah.
Right, men's mental health. And I think
Yeah, that's
we were talking about how like you just said you have dealt with anxiety and stuff like that. It's like I was even talking about it. I was like, well, like here's the month that, like I told her, I was like, hey, like does anyone know right now what month it is? And they were like, oh, it's I don't even know the name. I think it's June or July or whatever it was. And but I was like, hey, it's Men's Mental Health Month. I was like, did you guys know that? But I was like, let's talk about it. But I was like, and like when you go through the media, it's like they're saying their own thing about they have whatever month it was for them. Like they were just promoting that. I was like, you guys don't realize, you guys talk about how we should care for people, we should do this, we should do that. But I was like, that only extends for a woman. Like realistically, it's like I know the girls in my life, and they'll be like, well, just go talk to someone about it. And you can't really tell someone like, I don't have that. I don't have that men in my life to do that. And so go talk to your girl about it. It's like even with people like in my life, I'll be like, some things you go to your partner for, 100%. Yeah. But early on, like you need strong men in your life to be able to. Like for me,
I think everyone, regardless, I mean, everybody needs a role model they can connect with because they see themselves in that person, and that's a powerful thing. And I think that's one area where it lacks. Where sometimes like young men don't have a whole bunch of role models. There's also like this learning that like hey, talk about how you're feeling. It's okay. This is normal. And like take anything weird out of that, like this false sense of like macho-ness or
that masculinity gets affected.
I mean, like because there's like some of that stuff I just find it's silly. I mean, like it's like there's real strength and then there's perceived stuff, and perceived is only that. Real strength is at your core, and I've seen big strong people quit stuff and break down and cry when smaller, less you would think would go right away, sort of past it and did it, being vague on purpose. But I mean, the thing is like, it's a character thing, right? And it's, and I think, but for young men, learning that it's okay to do that, and having a person you feel confident to do that as it's just good. That's like a life coach kind of person to have, and it's important. But I think the more that it's talked about, right, not just on a day or in a month, but just knowing that because like your life doesn't end there, and neither do your concerns or any mental health or any problems or any stresses or nervousness or fears. They're carrying on with you every day. So this is something to go check in on and to do. It's a healthy thing. It's like the stigma when it comes to like therapy, like almost is there. I mean, I think everybody should have like don't go there.
Life coach.
Get someone to bounce ideas off of or something. Yeah,
literally. And I think a lot of people don't. And I think it's not only like you may not have someone to talk to about it. It's also who's that person you're talking to, right? Sometimes I found that if I was younger, like this is in grade 10, grade 11, like people you teach, right? If I was to talk to my friend about my mental health or just about like let's just say forget mental health, like something that happened in life, right? They might not be they themselves are so new to everything they don't understand. But if I went to you and said, hey sir, by the way, this is what's happening at home. This is what this happened, blah blah blah. You would be so much more understanding. You'd be like, you know what, this is why this is. Like let's talk about it, right? But it's getting to that point of being like, you don't need to talk about it to your friends, but you can always talk about your family. And then getting to the point of being like, okay, if I spoke to this person, like choose, like vetting the person, right? It's like you want to take advice from a person you won't take criticism from. Yeah. That's like my quote, right? It's like if I came to you for advice, I was like, I'd take criticism from you. But if you gave me criticism, but I wouldn't take advice from you, shut the fuck up. I was like, this isn't happening. This is not going to happen anymore. I was like, and I told myself, it's like, even when people come to me, it's like, so-and-so says this about me, or so-and-so said everything about their own life. I was like, yo, like, realistically. And I had a friend, and he has, like, a really crazy company, and they were just giving it to him, right? I was like, if she came up to you right now, and she said, you're not running your business properly because you're doing this, that, and the other, and she had nothing to show, but that's what she said to you. Would you take that advice? Yeah. He's like, no. I was like, I'll tell her something, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, exactly. There it is. Don't take that. It's like if she's saying all this shit about you, but you'll never take the
discern from the voices.
Exactly.
It's like, who are you to tell me, like, oh, ouch, that really hurts coming from, again, what have you done? Like,
exactly, right? It's like, oh, I need to know, why do you call me my first name and last name? There it is.
But, when you get it from the other ones, you still got to be able to take that on the chin and go,
of course,
right?
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to recognize it's like, some stuff is just
you're just
noise.
You maybe just sad at
just
yourself.
Noise, and it can sound scary, and it can sound mean, and it can make words, but don't hold on to garbage, right?
100%.
I think, like it's important to have role models. But I think one of the things I'd say too is like if someone, and this is I think a big thing for guys too, because like sometimes we can like just dismiss things. But if like if one of your bros comes to you like and like brings something up, that you have to recognize that person trusts you, and you can't like ditch them on it.
Mhm.
You can't just push it away. It's now
You
your
gotta be
job.
there. Yeah,
You
yeah.
know what? You gotta like you be there for the person, right? Don't even. Yeah, you're gonna feel uncomfortable. You know, yes, it's not gonna be normal, but like don't ditch them. Be with them. Like go with them to the next thing. If you're not the person, be like, listen, I'll go with you to this next thing. Okay, you trust me a little bit of this. You know what? Yeah, I won't. I got you. Okay. I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, this is a bit, but we'll go together. We'll find something in this. Okay, you're not alone. Okay, because if you know, oh my God, if you might be the one.
Yeah, you might be that
And-
last
yeah,
person.
and the last one,
Exactly.
exactly, the last one, and then when and good Lord, what might happen after the fact? And you'd be like, oh my God, I had no idea.
Yeah, being that shoulder
Yeah.
crown, so like God forbid that you're like carrying him on your shoulder instead,
Yeah.
right? And like that's what happens.
Yeah.
That's a lot of times what happens. Like a lot of times people say like, yeah, I'd rather my mate cry on my shoulder than me carrying him
Yeah.
to like on his last day, right? So it's like, and
Exactly.
people don't realize how strong that one voice could be. And like even when I'll talk to people, and like I'm just like I'm like a naturally like more like I'm a little bit more positive with things because I realize
you
like
are.
it's
Yeah.
it's
You've
important
always
to
been.
be right.
Yeah.
It's like more like what's the point of it? But then there's this one friend of mine and like love him, and then I just remember we had like a really nice gym session one day. Right, and I was like, "You should do this, you should do this," and I was just being me.
Yeah.
But even till like a year later, he'll still like thank me. He's like, "Bro, I couldn't do this without you." And I'm like, "I was just doing me, right?"
Yeah,
it was
you
like
didn't think
I
anything
didn't
special
think
about
exactly.
it, right?
But I was like,
Yeah.
he was in such a low point in his life that he didn't even know that that's what he needed. He didn't want to talk to anyone. And sometimes it's like it's your job to be like, is something wrong? Instead of someone coming to you, come to them, and be like, hey, like is like just checking up?
Yeah.
Is something wrong? And 8 times out of 10, they might be like, you know what? Like, I'm so glad you said this. This is what happened in my life recently. Like, you know, I'm actually going through it. And they may have been no solution, but the fact that he got it out of his chest, he went to someone, he judgment free, and that's what they wanted. Like, my life is so much better. They're like, life is so much better. And what did you lose? Like 10 minutes just talking to a friend?
Exactly.
Right?
I mean, as a teacher, one of the things I try to do is look, if I think about something after, like I've just seen a student like, sitting in a hallway, and as I walk into my room, I'm like, and if I just find myself still thinking about them, like maybe they looked a bit sad, and I'm like, okay, you know what? I go back. I say, hey, how are you doing? I say, I've seen you here a lot or something like that. You just get dropped off early. Just start a conversation. You know what? Maybe nothing at all, right? Or maybe that was actually like that actually is something. That's someone reaching out when you thought no one was going to. And you can't really tell when those moments are going to happen, but when they do, like, you know, go with what your feelings and instincts are essentially, like, you know, telling you, especially if like your conscience is kicking you on something, like, you know, what's the worst going to happen, like, you know. But the second thing on top of that is that when they do sometimes, like, then you stop, you park, okay. You know,
So you talk to him about it,
don't ditch them, don't
Yeah.
stop. You have to right then and there. Yeah, it's never going to be at a good time. You do it anyways, right? Because you will never in the end regret that. Make decisions, do things in your life that at the end of the day, you have no problem going to bed.
Speaking of regret, this one thing I want to tie off everything with is, what's something you wanted to be remembered by?
Oh, jeez.
Or who do you want to be remembered by?
That's a great question. I've never, I would hope someone who cared. You know, someone who tried to make things better for his community and for people around him, and tried to try to help, and hopefully just a good guy. You know, I've never, you know, honestly, I've never really even put thought to it. But you know, it's
But the beauty is you may have not put thought to it, but everything that you're doing, everything that you said that you're doing, it's like getting you to that spot, right? It's like maybe you have the end goal there, but you're doing the thing right now, right? You're doing the reps to get to that eventually, the end goal that you didn't even know that was there.
Yeah, like in the end of the day, it's like I've always, when I was a kid, I was bullied, and then I became a person who bullies didn't like. It's I don't like bullying.
Yeah.
I've never done that, and I could get there's something there, but I'm victim first, then I'll see what's going on with the other person. But it's I've always been on this. I like to think I'm on the good side team. You know, I'm a good guy kind of person, and I don't like. There's a lot of people who are just what's the old adage? You've got a lot of people who are sheep, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they will be bystanding, and then you've got the ones that are wolves or the villains that do horrible things, are just mean, and there's but then you have the other people who are like the sheep herders, the sheepdogs.
It's
And that's
dogs.
me,
Yeah.
right? That, like, you know, you don't ever attack any sheep, but you protect. But in a wolf, you step in and you
Fuck around and find out, right?
well, yeah, in a way, right? But it's kind of like, and you do it in the smartest way possible. But it's like, at the end of the day, I think it comes down to like, I don't want to be that adage of the old guy that's on the porch looking back with regret. And also, regret stays with you. Like when you should have done something and you didn't, that guilt, it just never leaves until you do something, I think, about it. Because you can't change the past, but you can, going forward, you can make a decision you can change. And that's why, like, yeah, that's really why I look at it. I just want to be able to be all right with, and do right by me in the end. By the end of it, saying, you know what, okay, I did the best I could, and I wasn't, a monster about anything here, right? Yeah.
Well, that's a wrap, guys. Thank you so much again for coming on.
Man, thanks for having me.
What's the next steps that we can find you, and what can we expect from Mr. Livingston?
Next coming up for me, I would say, semester's coming for some days now, but my next book will be coming out, and I'll come back and talk about it if you want. It's
100%.
Next year, and you can find me on, for the older ones, on Facebook. I'm on Twitter again. Like I'm on it, but like I'll be on it quite a bit more on social media. I don't like Instagram so much because I just don't like the style of it too much. There's too many things, but you can reach me online. You can look me up on Google. You'll find me. I'm happy to, especially with the books. I'll be doing book talks and presentations. So hey, look forward to that. Right, the camera's over here. Right, you can hear some interesting history and some good stories that are and have a good evening. But hey, good for you for doing this. I'm glad it's just something you're passionate about, and you're taking it, and you're doing something with it, and very organized about it too. I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
Reminders and the stuff online. I'm like, I got to talk to you about one of those. That works really good. I'm like, that's a good thing. I need to use that. But no, yeah, you're doing great.
Appreciate
and you guys are you're living your best lives, and it's and you and your brother here. It's good catching up. Former students that are just taking life and going with it, and that's one of the most satisfying things as a teacher, man, ever. I love seeing that. That is feels so good. So I'm very proud of you too.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Mr. Simpson.
Cheers.
Okay.